Yes, hello there and welcome to today's episode of Weekend Rewind. Yes, this is when we put our hands back into the Join Up Dots vaults, swirl it around a bit and find an episode that maybe has got lost in the midst of time. And this is in response to the amount of requests we get from people who say, David, with all the episodes you've released, where should we start? Well, it's very hard to find a place, so we're just going to randomly pick one, and this is today's episode. Enjoy.
When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there world. Welcome to Join Up Dots, episode 293, and we have got a guest on the show today. And I'll be honest, I'm a heterosexual male, but this man is a bit of a man crush because the lifestyle that he's living is the kind of thing that really I would like myself, and I think so many of us would like themselves as well. He's the co-founder of OpenWorld, the world's #1 resource for active lifestyle creators. And what that means is instead of finding a job to fund your lifestyle, you create your lifestyle and then find ways to fund it. If you want to be an underwater basket weaver, then work out how much you need to earn to do this, and then go out and find different ways of funding this. Be creative with the choices that you make to achieve your dreams, and don't be pigeonholed by what people tell you is the normal route to success. Do things your way and love every second of your life. Well, today's guest has always had that entrepreneurial spirit, and since the age of 9 has loved to flex his hustle muscle, and with a history entailing going from broke ramen-eating college graduate, I don't even know what ramen is to be honest, to growing a profitable online business and pursuing lifestyle design with reckless abandon, he is showing that muscle on a daily basis. And through his many adventures around the world has been robbed, fallen from bridges and motorbikes, shouldn't laugh, hugged exotic animals and nearly died several times in pursuit of his dreams. He is now a man who can literally call the world his home and the planet his playground. So what was it about him that made him up for the challenge to brush himself down and go again when things got tough? And why would he say that the world hasn't quite bought into the belief that they can literally create the life of their dreams? Well, let's find out as we bring onto the show to start joining up dots with the one and only Mr. Danny Flood. How are you, Danny?
Mr. Ralph, thank you so much for that awesome introduction. By the way, ramen noodles are the traditional noodles of Japan, but they are typically found in the grocery stores for about 20 cents a pack.
So it's a cheap way. It's a cheap way of funding yourself if you're a student then.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to make it, who are trying to I think a lot of us would not survive if not for the ramen noodles. So whoever invented those, I wish I could have a conversation with him and just express my gratitude.
Did you have things in America and the rest of the world? Obviously, I'm speaking from the United Kingdom. We had these things called pot noodles, which are amazing things where you just basically take off the lid and you pour hot water into them, and about 5 minutes later, it's a noodly meal. Did you have those?
I'm sure it's probably very similar to that. And are you familiar with James Altucher, David?
Yes, I am.
James Altucher, he did a post on this recently, and he said that whoever invented ramen noodles, I think the guy was like 50 years old or something. He told the story about him, but he's like, I would have starved long ago if not for this guy. So I think it's probably similar to the pot noodles that you have. It's not exactly the most nutritious. It's very carb heavy, but it's also very cheap, and you get a lot of calories for your buck.
The best one, Danny, if you're ever in a shop and you're looking around and you see pot noodle and you think, oh, I remember this from that show, look for the Bombay Bad Boy. That's the one. That's the one that would put hairs on your chest. Even if you're a lady, you're turned into a man. It's powerful stuff, the Bombay Bad Boy.
Yeah, I guess.
What I want to know about you, Danny, is really, where do you get your spirit from? Because you've had a journey which has been, well, it's been ups and downs to say the least. Is it something that you look back on and you go, yeah, I've always had that spirit in life? Or is it something that came to a point and you thought, right, there's only one way, and that's forward. I've got to go forward. Can you sort of assess that?
Well, I did kind of feel like there was a way that was being forced on me, but I always felt like I've been a bit of a rebel, David. Ever since going up to like second grade, I was kicked out of like 3 or 4 schools even before then, second or third grade, and for some reason I kept feeling like this mold was being placed on me, and I just couldn't fit into this mold that the world was placing on me. And I think in high school I had the record for most absent days and most doctor's visits, because I always have to go to the doctor to get a note so I could skip class. I'm not exactly proud of that distinction, but going back, I feel like my whole life I always felt like I wasn't fitting into, I wasn't meshing into the mold that society was placing on me, that I feel pressured into.
And what was it a problem? Was it something that you kind of thought, this is actually fun, I'm doing this, I'm skipping classes, I'm enjoying myself, or was you a tortured soul because you was doing it?
I was a tortured soul. I felt guilty, and I was depressed because I could go to several points in my life, David, but after graduating college especially, I had to figure out the next 50 years of my life out, and I felt like there was no help. I felt like I was alone, and I was looking out for mentors, and I just it was really depressing, and I kind of used that pain as a motivator to try to find answers. And I was looking for answers everywhere, and working really hard, but mostly struggling. And eventually I was able to kind of put the pieces together, or join up the dots, as you would say. And you say you envy me now, but any person you look up to, there was probably a long, hard road and a struggle to get there. Over the last 5 years, you probably checked on my bio, I've traveled over 30 countries and just done all these things around the world, because I really dug deep and asked myself, what's true to me? What do I really want? Not what other people want, because I felt like the more I tried to please other people and do what I was supposed to be doing, it was making me unhappy. And we could talk about that, or whatever you want to jump in.
Well, no, it's a key point, isn't it? It's a key point to most people's lives that when you start, and I think it's probably programmed, because when you're a child, you get told what to do all the time. And so you kind of buy into that is what's life. You get told when to go to bed, you get told to go to school, you get told by your teachers. And then when you get into that middle ground of actually finding your feet, you're so programmed from 13, 15, 16 years of being told what to do. You kind of almost like that somehow, and it's not till later in your life you start rebelling, because you think to yourself, hang on, this isn't the life I want, this is somebody else's life that I'm leading. So did you see that with sort of other people in your sort of vicinity, your peer group? Were there other people kind of going into directions where you think, that's not you, why are you doing that? I know your dad's a carpenter, but you're going to be a rubbish carpenter, and you could just see it from the outside, because I certainly could. Growing up, I could see people following their parents into jobs just because it was their parents, but it was so not them. That's exactly, you're describing me exactly. So you talk about my peer group. I could tell you about myself, David, because the closest person in my life was my father. And he loved me a lot, but he was definitely trying to mold me into a version of himself. And when I was a child, people would say, "Oh, that's Jim Flood's son," and he looks just like you, or stuff like this. And I say, I don't want to be Jim Flood's son. I want to be Danny Flood, because that's who I am. And I really. And my father was this former Army captain. He was an entrepreneur who started 3 businesses. He was obsessed with golf. I like golf, but I'm not passionate about it like he was. And he's always making me do all these rules, like no television before 5. Every morning I have to do push-ups and pull-ups and do all this stuff. And he had all these things on my wall, like what it takes to be number one. It was like this old article series, and it'd be Earl Morale and Vince Lombardi articles and stuff in there, and he's like trying to program me to be this winner in life. And I'm really grateful for that, but at the same time I was a little bit resentful. And it's when he passed away 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. It was really, really hard for me, and I felt like one chapter of my life was over, but at the same time I realized that I really am on my own now. So did he give you a gift then, Danny? That kind of focusing in on something that isn't really you, but you were still willing to do it. Is that a gift, or is that something that actually anchors you to a position you don't want to be in?
He did leave me with a lot of gifts, you know. I'm really thankful for the lessons that he left me with, you know, because I implement them daily in my life. You know, he told me things like, you know, winners never quit. Kill your enemies with kindness. You know, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Cream rises to the top. You know, he was instilling in me this desire to never give up, and I feel like it's been very instrumental in my success because you know, I've been experimenting with a lot of different things to try to figure out, you know, what's my place in the world, and I've been trying one thing after another, and it doesn't always work out. You know, sometimes you encounter rejection and failure, but just being able to deal with it and you know, come up cheerful about it, you know, even if you lose, and just have a winning positive attitude has served me really well. And a lot of what I've been focused on as an entrepreneur, and I really think it starts with your mind, and so I've been really focused on how to sculpt the mind and rewire the mind so that you know, I can face adversity, but also face success, and face both fear of failure and fear of success, which is, in my opinion, just as powerful, maybe even more powerful than fear of failure. So,
if you listen to yesterday's episode, Danny, there was a gentleman on Valentine's Day and called Mike Ferry, and he's a teacher in Virginia, and he is a history teacher, but he's also trying to teach the kids to focus in on happiness, because he believes that by being happy, that is the starting point to success, where so many people think that you're going to find success and then become happy. So he thinks it's a real mindset that you've got to start at the very beginning. So have you always been a happy guy? Because you've got a big beaming smile in all the pictures I look at you, but then you are sort of up to your neck in water in a tropical island, so it looks like you're going to be happy. So have you always been one of those kind of little kids that's always been sort of pretty much grooving around on his own, enjoying life?
You know, David, it's a complicated question because, you know, I struggled with depression up until about age 25 or 26 because you know, I had this positive attitude, but sometimes, you know, reality was kind of like kicking me in the face, you know. You know, so for instance, when I became a young man and I was out on my own out of college, you know, just I graduated in the middle of the recession. I'm 29 now, but at that point, I was always kind of comparing myself to other people, and I felt like I was not successful, and I felt this enormous pressure on myself to have all these things and do all these things that everything was telling me. So I was really trying to be happy, but I couldn't really come into my own way, at least not at first.
But what about
kind of a process.
The real young version of you? So I can understand that when you've got comparisons and you've got expectations and you've got a path that you see other people living. But when you were like the sort of the 7, the 8 and the 9-year-old Danny, basically, as we all do as kids, we live our lives, we get on our bikes and we ride around. Was that a happy version? Was that a happy version when you didn't have, you know, anything to strive for as such?
Yeah, I think so. But, you know, my father always brought me up to be really competitive. So I was really a competitive person, always striving to win and finish first. So I was happy. I had a great childhood. But my father, he trained me to be an entrepreneur at age 9. So, and, you know, when we went to soccer games and baseball games, you know, I always had to be on the MVP team. He was always trying to get me to win the golf tournaments I played in, you know, and it was a lot of pressure for sure. So, you know, I was definitely happy, but I didn't feel like I was living my own life. I was just kind of going along with emotions, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And so when it started coming towards you and you suddenly started realising that the path was there in front of you, and more often than not, it's a creeping realisation. It seems to me from reading about you, and I've read a lot about you, that it was almost when you started to go against those expectations and those comparisons and you just started to pretty much enjoy yourself, that's when it started to come together for you. Would that be true?
Yeah, exactly. I think when you put too much pressure on yourself, you feel this pressure to succeed at all costs, and you know, it can really throw you out of whack. And there's all these things all these inner demons that you have to wrestle with. You know, and we make up excuses for why we're not feeling adequate, I suppose. And so I had lots of alibis. I was afraid of doing things. I was afraid of trying things. It got to the point where, you know, if you want to create something, if you want to write a book, you're afraid that what if I fail? And you really got to get over that, and you got to stop trying to be the best, because if you rely so much on your own talent, I was reading this article the other day where Google, they're not interested in hiring college graduates anymore. They want to hire people who are humble and who can continue to grow and continue to realize that maybe someone else is better than me and I can learn something from them. So really, I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but I had I think a lot of us have secret excuses that are holding us back, like alibis, and we have like a secret excuse that we carry around, like lack of money, lack of time, lack of energy, fear of failure, fear of ridicule, fear of rejection, fear of social isolation. And so I think a lot of these are really holding us back from getting where we want to be. And I think I've deviated from the original question.
No, I think you've led us into an amazing area, really. But Google, that are literally one of the best companies on earth, and they dominate. And once you get into Google land, you really, it blows your mind what they're getting up to. And the fact that they're now looking for people that are humble, that just means that they realise the strength is when somebody becomes aware of what they don't know more than what they can bring to the table. That's the people that are willing to actually look around and learn and become better versions of themselves. They're spot on, aren't they?
Exactly, and I can kind of sum that all up with an analogy, David. So my book is all about, personal transformation, helping people to become their best selves and do, be, and go what they want in life. I think we live in an incredible age where opportunities are endless, but sometimes people need someone who has a little bit more experience, who's maybe 5-10 years ahead of them, who has done this stuff, to kind of show them how. And the analogy that I'm getting to is, I think life is a little bit like jujitsu. So jujitsu, it's not always the strongest or the toughest or the most aggressive person who wins. It's the person who stays humble, and the way you advance is by literally getting thrown around. So you come in and you think you're going to kick someone's ass, and then someone who's more experienced kind of just tosses you around, and then you're like, oh shoot, I still have so much to learn. And so the only way you keep getting thrown around, you keep getting beaten up, and then you advance to a higher belt. And so the person who keeps advancing is someone who knows where they're at, is humble and willing to learn from those who are more experienced than them. And the only way that you can advance is by continually getting kicked around and thrown around and just losing again and again. but being comfortable with both your failures and your victories as well, and learning from them both.
But there's a strong metaphor for why people don't actually try the things you're talking about. The fact that, the listeners out there, they're in a crappy job, they're in a crappy situation, and they're wanting more, but they're unwilling to give it a go. The thought of going, right, okay, give it a go and you're going to get beaten up every day for about 6 months, it's going to stop people wanting to do it, isn't it? Is there a mindset that you've got to have right from the very beginning that says, look, it's not all going to be roses. It's not all going to be the quick route. It's going to be successes and failures, and I will get beaten up time and time again. Is that the key message?
Yeah, I think we all need positive reinforcement to continue. So, for example, let's say you want to learn Chinese. I've broken this down into how to make language learning simple. I think we make it too difficult on ourselves at the get-go. So Chinese can seem like an insurmountable obstacle. And I think the problem is that the first thing you learn when you learn Chinese is tones. And so tones are very kind of complicated and complex for speakers like us, English speakers, because we're not familiar with it. And another example is like pinyin. So pinyin is a Chinese phonetic version made to look like English, but it's not pronounced exactly the way we use English. So when I tell people, like, if in my guide to learning Chinese from Mandarin, for example, you have to translate it into terms that are easy to understand, and you need to start there, and you need to learn some of the basic phrases. And once you're able to learn that, and you're able to kind of start communicating with people, that's rewarding. And when you have these rewards, they kind of pile up and they encourage you to continue. And so I think if there's something you want to do, don't start by trying to reach expert status right away. Break it down into small chunks that are easy to digest where you're at. So, for example, as a native English speaker, if you're trying to tackle tones and pinyin right from the beginning, it's going to be very, very hard. But if you want to learn a language and you apply other things that are easier, you can make progress much faster. And really, the biggest obstacle is ourselves and our own internal resistance. So if we feel like something's too difficult or too insurmountable, like Mandarin Chinese, then we're not even going to attempt it. We're going to say, I can't do this. And I think when we reach that point where we say that we can't do this, that's when failure truly occurs, because once we have that thought, we're going to pile on other thoughts that reinforce that belief. And so we need to kind of create the belief that we can do it, and then begin to reinforce that thought by piling on more thoughts. Because I think a lot of people spend their days where their thoughts are kind of running on autopilot. So if we have one negative thought, a bunch of other thoughts kind of pile onto that and then reinforce this notion, we become depressed. And so when our thoughts kind of, we spend our days kind of letting our thoughts run out of control, we kind of run on autopilot. And so it really comes down to, first we have to identify how this process works, and then work to reinforce the thoughts that we want to have that get us in the direction that we want to go in.
Well, let's play some words that really sort of take us on to the next part of our conversation. And these were said last year by a Hollywood A-lister, Jim Carrey.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job. And our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
So that's a key statement to your life, isn't it? It seems to me that it all came together when you decided that you might as well take a chance on not doing what other people want you to do, but doing what you know you will love. Did you see the similarities with that and yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. A big part of the problem was I was, comparing myself to others, and that was constantly making me unhappy. And I really had to dig deep and decide, what is it that I really want to do? And it was a really tough process, David. I mean, everything in me said that this is wrong, and I was feeling all of this resistance, but, I felt like I had to do it. I had to push through that uncomfortable feeling.
Is it a key point to life generally, from your experience now? Because you've seen, you're doing something, you're rocking and rolling, you're loving what you're doing at the moment, but you've been through this journey of successes and failures, and we're going to touch on why you nearly died several times in pursuit of your dreams. But because that is, so many stories are going to come out there. But is that something that really we need to get to the kids younger, to say to them, look, you can have a life that you love. You don't actually have to buy into this myth that has been created over generations and generations and generations, where you've got to be serious, you've got to get a job. Is it time for us to literally say to the world, you can have your cake and eat it if you're willing to put in the effort to make that cake and take it where you want it to be?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a very short answer to a very passionate rant, Danny. So let's get into that. Died several times in pursuit of your dreams, then, because not many people would go that far in the pursuit of the dreams to nearly die. So give us an example of those. Were they something that you look back on now and you go, I was just being stupid, or were they something that you think, no, actually, I could have only got to where I wanted to be by overcoming these?
Well, David, I think that when you look back, sometimes the worst experiences make the best stories, I think. When I first, started out on this path and, trying to tackle these things that I really wanted, I wanted to travel around South America, and I did that, for 4 months. But I was just sitting around and I was thinking about it, I was pondering it, and I was worried about all these irrational fears that could happen. Like what if I get robbed or raped, or not raped, robbed or mugged, or
I don't know why I laughed at that. It sounds horrific.
What if I don't like the food or something and I starve, or I don't know, I had all these ridiculous fears. And I think what's really empowering is if you've been through that, if you've experienced something that's bad, or you let something bad happen, I think you learn a very, very valuable lesson. So I think if you realize that, things that could happen are not as bad as the fear of what could happen. So, I've lost iPhone. I've had my iPhone stolen in Brazil. I've lost an iPad in Tokyo. I've had my wallet stolen in Vietnam. I mean, I've had things taken from me. But life goes on, and I realize it's not that big a deal. I mean, life continues, and you can work it out, and all that stuff. It's just stuff, and it's just not that important to me anymore. And I've realized that there are other things that are more important. As far as near-death experiences, yeah, I've had a couple of them. One was falling from a bridge in Malaysia. I did a motorcycle ride across Vietnam and almost crashed at one point. And yeah, we could talk about those and what I've learned, but it's up to you.
Yeah, but carry on with that story. So you're on this motorbike and you're going through Vietnam, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about the BBC TV program Top Gear, who went through Vietnam on a motorbike. I don't know if you've seen that episode, but how they literally were just plummeted from the heaviest rainfalls you could ever see, and it was an experience of highs and lows, dramatic scenery of beauty, but also just misery, and it was turgid, just driving along in this pouring rain and stuff. So was that something that you felt that you needed to do? Was it the adventure of actually getting on a motorbike and driving into the unknown, or was it the fact that you had a passion to see the country?
It was just I was driven by freedom, this quest for freedom, and nothing was more freeing than just being able to travel this country. And it took about a month and a half for the trip in total. And, I just felt completely free. I was able to just do what I wanted to do, and nothing could compare to that experience. And like you said, I mean, the scenery was just gorgeous. I was joined by a French travel mate who also bought his own motorbike. And we were just traveling along the mountains up near Laos, along the border with Laos. And, every 20 meters or so, there's like another waterfall just cascading down the cliffs here. And, there was no other people within 1,000, well, maybe not 1,000 miles, but hundreds of miles, and it was just fantastic, this gorgeous scenery. And when I nearly had this accident. First of all, we were going through these mountains, then we'd be like herds of cows that would suddenly be on the road, and we're just like, trying to steer around them. It's probably a really dangerous trip, and everyone told us we shouldn't do it. There's no telling what would happen. And then it was on the very last day of this trip when I was coming back from Halong Bay, which is where all those limestone, famous limestone cliffs are. This truck suddenly just coming the other direction, tried to swerve in front of me and turn. And I was going too fast. I couldn't avoid him. So I just kind of sort of awkwardly steered the bike one way, and I had to jump from the bike, and I just kind of rolled a little bit. And, they were really apologetic, and they bought some bandages for me and stuff. And I was really shaken up. I was kind of scarred a little bit, not scarred, but really bruised up. And it was weird. I felt really low, but at the same time, I could hear my father's voice, which is kind of, I don't know, kind of weird. And he's kind of laughed there with me, kind of laughing along and saying, "Ain't this the shits?" or something like that. And he's like, don't worry about it, buddy. Just pick yourself up. You're gonna be all right. And just, he was there with me, just kind of sharing an experience, and it was pretty powerful because he passed away on my 27th birthday, and this was 6 months after that. Is freedom
a key word to you? If I ask, and I'm not going to, but if I asked you to sort of choose maybe 3 or 4 words that really apply to you, would freedom be one of those in there? Because it seems to me that there's a spirit about you that means that you're never going to be living in suburbia. You're always going to be doing things your way and being quite disconnected in somehow from what people expect of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Freedom has been what's been driving me, and I've always felt like a rebel. I've always felt like an outcast from normal, conventional society. And just when I realized that I could be an adult and I could have this freedom, I could have my cake and eat it too, to me was very liberating. So if there's anyone who's listening to this who feels like their dharma is out of sync, that they're out of alignment, that they're not feeling like they're living true to their core values, then I just want to give you an encouragement. I'm a living example that you can have it.
I'm the living, I'm that as well. And the fact that freedom has always been my thing. It's always been, I've always felt like if I was standing on a mountain or a hill, I'd love to know what was over the other side of the hill. And, there was always that feeling of Could I escape from my responsibilities? And do you ever have that thought, Danny, where you kind of go, if I disappeared now, how long would it be before they found me? If I started taking money out secretly from an ATM over a period of time, so I've got a lot of cash, could I get to somewhere without them knowing me through borders and stuff? Do you ever have that feeling of real escapism and just disappearing?
I do. I kind of, but at the same time, I don't really feel like I'm running away from something, if that's what you mean.
No, it's not running away. It's just the challenge of seeing if you can escape. Because I feel it all the time. Every time I go to an ATM and I take money out, there's this thing in me that I think, could I just disappear here? Could I just, and then turn up again later and go, you had no idea where I was. And there's a big part of my spirit, there's a big part of my personality that craves for that unexpected adventure, just doing something off the cuff because it's something I want to do. And I'm just interested to see if you're the same.
Well, David, I feel like anytime you feel like you have to escape, then there's something that's not right in your life. Something is out of sync, and you really have to do some introspection, some meditation, find out why you feel like you have to escape. Is it your work that's causing you that way, or causing you to feel that way? And the way I feel it, what I'm doing, and the way I live my life, and the way I do my work is that I'm not running away from life. I'm running to life, if that makes sense.
And with OpenWorld, your online platform, is that a place where you can run to and you feel that it's all coming together? It's your identity, but it gives you the flexibility of being who you want to be as well?
Well, yeah, David, I've been thinking about this a lot. OpenWorld is not the company that funded my adventures. It was a different company. It was a marketing company. I wasn't really passionate about that work. But, I've been thinking about this a lot because, David, I still have, good days and I still have bad days where I feel, like things aren't working out and I'm not getting anywhere. And when I think that goals, I'm a big person on goals, but I think goals can become impotent and fade. And I think it's really your vision and your mission that stays. And that's what really kind of sustains you and keeps you going. So on the days when I'm feeling down, when something doesn't work out, I get rejected, I can feed off this mission that I have. And I think with my work, what I'm doing now, I think that really feels like it's my purpose right now.
And so what is your vision and mission? So the listeners out there, obviously we've spoken about your life leading up to it, but what is your core vision?
Well, David, I've kind of been through this. I've been through I've gone through the tunnel. I've seen the light at the other side, and I'm just kind of coming back and helping to inspire people to kind of follow on this path, because I don't feel like I'm escaping from anything. And I think that the way I'm living my life, the way that this is all developing, I think it's just growing. I think it's going to continue to grow. And just before this interview at right here, it's 5:44 p.m. right now. At 4:51, I just got a message on Facebook that said, Danny, your book just made me buy a one-way ticket to Bali.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
And I look on the reviews that people have written and just what people have said, and someone else said I inspired them to open their own jewelry business, online e-commerce jewelry business, and they're now living on a tropical island. So, I feel like this is really what I want to do, because this is the book that I wish that I had when I was 22 or 23 and I was coming out of college and trying to figure out my life. And I felt like I was alone. And, and I looked at do I have to work in a cubicle now? And I felt really depressed because there were no good jobs. And, whenever I applied to a job, I always had this feeling like it was kind of below me, like a little bit beneath my qualifications. And so I wasn't really even excited to apply to these jobs. And, of course, they didn't even hear back from me. So, you use those and you use these experiences as reference experiences to kind of gauge where you're at and your self-worth, your feeling of self-worth. So my feeling of self-worth was very low. And then so what helped me get over my depression and stuff is that I collected enough reference experiences that told me, I am more than what the world is telling me. And I can do more. I'm capable of more. I can accomplish more. And you collect enough of these reference experiences, and they kind of give you a better window into who you are, a better picture in the mirror, I think.
So let's bring your book into the conversation. You've got the book buyyourowisland.com, and people can go over to the show links and download a free gift from you, which is the audio version of that book. Where did that idea come from? Because it's one of those phrases, isn't it? If you win the lottery, what you're going to do? You're going to buy your own island and you're going to sit there drinking tequilas every day. But the reality is very different from buying your own island. And I've spoken to quite a few people who have actually bought their own island now, and it's not as glamorous as it sounds, to be honest. It's all right, but it's nicer to be in the comfort of your own home with Netflix and all that kind of stuff and sitting on an island. So what can I get from Buy Your Own Island?
Well, Buy Your Own Island, as far as the title is concerned, it's a metaphor. So an island is kind of like the ultimate symbol of freedom and independence. And the inspiration for that title and the story behind it is, I read a story about Tynan, who's also known as the character Herbal from the game. He had this childhood dream of owning his own island, and he was able to put together a deal with a few friends and buy one through the Canadian version of Craigslist for less than $100,000. And the lesson of that story is that, well, he says that, huge lifelong dreams can become practical and made to happen within a matter of weeks. And sometimes it's just a matter of thinking outside of the box, doing a little research, rather than just simply assuming that it's impossible or impractical. Because most of us, we see people that we admire, we see people that are doing these incredible things, or maybe we don't have enough role models. But it just seems like, I could never do that. And so I really want to shake people up and kind of get them out of that feeling like they can't do that, and tell them, you really can change. And this is the blueprint how to do it. And you can have whatever it is you dream of having. When we were children, people asked us, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we say, I want to be a pilot, or I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a basketball player. And somehow the way the course of our adult lives has really deviated very far from that. I want to pull people back and say, you can have this. You can live the life that you envisioned. And this book is my earnest attempt at showing people how to do that.
Well, I think it's a great book, and obviously listeners go over, because the message in it is so join up dots. It's untrue. It's so the fact that, as Danny was saying, when you were a kid, people say, what do you want to be? A princess, an astronaut, and all these amazing things. And you never thought to yourself it was stupid wanting to be a princess. You just thought it was going to happen. But now when you get into the older life, then that's when you go, I'm going to be an insurance agent. I'm going to be a banker. Are they the goals that you would have had as a kid, or are they just realism? Are they the ones that people have told you to have, or are they the ones that you really want? And more often than not, certainly from my case, looking at it from the outsider's point of view now, I see that every single person on Join Up Dots, and this is episode 293, have all got to that point where they've said no more. There's no more living other people's lives. There's no more doing jobs that I'm not happy with. Whether I'm going to sink and swim, I'm going to give it a go, just like Jim Carrey said. And so go over and get Buy Your Own Island, because it's a metaphor for taking action, and you can break down anything into actionable goals. And I'm going to play some words of that now. This is Oprah Winfrey, and she says this brilliantly when you're thinking about actually the big dream and it's too big for your brain to comprehend. This is what she says you should do.
The way through the challenge is to get still and ask yourself, what is the next right move? Not think about, I got all of this stuff. What is the next right move? And then from that space, make the next right move and the next right move. And not to be overwhelmed by it, because your life is bigger than that one moment. You're not defined by what somebody says is a failure for you, because failure is just there to point you in a different direction.
Do you see that, Danny? Is failure just there to point you in the right direction? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that don't take failure personally. And if I could just add one thing to that.
You go for it.
Yeah, I think success is even more terrifying than failure, David. And do you want me to tell you why?
Well, no, you tell me why, and I'm going to tell you why I totally agree with you afterwards.
Well, because I think when we fail, when we lose at something, suddenly all of our friends come out and they say, hey, it's all right, pick yourself up. They kind of come and comfort us. But when you succeed, there's a saying that success is lonely, or it's lonely at the top. And I totally agree that it is lonely. It's very fearful. Like if, when I published this book, I thought that it was going to be this huge thing off my chest, but it was even worse because I had all this stress that I have to promote it, and I've been up every day, 3 a.m. trying to put the word out. And success is even more scarier because you really have to kind of rely on a lot of people in order to succeed. And so, I think that success, like they say, success is lonely. I feel like there's a lot of pressure from our peers to kind of be realistic and live within our means. And when you kind of come out and say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do more. I want to reach higher than any of us have ever dreamed. I think that a lot of people, you feel like, people don't really expect that. They want you to come back down to their level. And so it's something that I've had to deal with constantly.
I when I started this show, it wasn't expected to be the success that it is now. And I was kind of happy with that. It was almost like a hobby. And I could do the show, and if somebody would come on there and talk to me, then that was great. But then it got to a point where suddenly I realised I was being noticed. And that, to me, was the scary moment. That was the moment when I thought, I've got to actually justify this. I've got to keep going with this. I've got to find guests every single day. I've got to up-level everything because this is what people are looking at now. And I agree with that totally. When you are successful, that is the start of the real hard work. Getting to that point is almost easy looking back on it. But once you get to that point and you think, right, I'm playing with the big boys now, this is when it gets serious. That was a moment where I sat on my sofa one afternoon thinking, am I up for the fight? Am I ready to do this? Or was it just a dream that I thought would be easier than it is? But I think once you proceed through that and you realise, yes, you have got that fight in you, then that's when it really becomes fun and interesting. Do you, Danny?
Yeah, and I think that the more successful you are, the more terrifying it gets. So it's never this place where you arrive that you're suddenly successful. Because you're always, like Oprah Winfrey said, you keep trying more and more, and you want the next thing you do to be even greater than what you've already done. And I've heard this quote recently, that perfectionism is the unwillingness to be vulnerable. And I think that the more you put yourself out there, the more you create art or books or start a business, the more you put yourself out there, the more vulnerable you become. And so if you do more, you become more vulnerable. And the fear never actually goes away. It becomes greater. It becomes multiplied. And so when you're vulnerable and you can accept that you're vulnerable and that people might come out and criticize you, or people might not like your work, the more vulnerable you become, the more self-confidence you develop, the more courage you have to continue on your path and to keep going and to keep striving and just live the life of your dreams and do whatever it is you really want to do.
Well, the key thing, though, I suppose, to all these conversations is getting to that point when you start to find your path. And as we see time and time again, once you start taking action, you take a certain amount of action and then you start to think, oh, this isn't really what I wanted. Yeah, I did think I wanted to buy my own island, but actually now I've been working towards it. I don't actually want my island. I want something else. And that's the problem, isn't it? People think that they need to have that passion and that goal right at the beginning, when more often than not, that goal comes along the journey. And it's more often than not, it's not even a goal that you would have perceived to begin with. It was like Google was saying, you become aware that there's opportunities. You be aware of what you don't know. And somewhere in those holes of what you don't know is more often than not the thing that you should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we chase after external things, and that could be different for each person. But the real gift that you get in this journey is internal, I think. So in my case, I was chasing after goals that were physical. It's like, climbing this mountain or crossing this country on a motorcycle. And, I was chasing after pleasure and what I was passionate about. I did tango dancing in Argentina. I was a Muay Thai fighter in Thailand. But the thing that's even at the next level is your purpose and your general satisfaction. And Tony Hsieh calls this the 3 Ps: pleasure, passion, and purpose. And so the purpose is the hardest to discover, but it's the one that provides the most lasting satisfaction in your life. And I think the real reward of the journey is internal and how it molds you as a person. So if you're passionate about something, you want to go have fun, by all means, go have it. Go buy that island. But if you find that it's not what you expect it to be, don't worry too much, because once you've hit that peak, you haven't lost anything. You've proven to yourself that you have achieved this. You've bought this island. You've achieved your highest dream goal. That's something to build on. That's a pillar that you can stand on. It's a pillar that builds your self-confidence, that builds your capacity to do more, to live more, to love more, and use that as your strength to live a life that's more meaningful to you and to those you care about.
There's a lot of similarities between your story and Tim Ferriss. When you're saying things that you were doing, like tango dancing in Argentina and learning how to sort of break down languages to sort of speed through, is he somebody that you are inspired by? Is he somebody that you're aware of? Because I know a lot of the things that you've said, I thought to myself, oh yeah, I remember him saying that he's done that.
Yeah, so I think earlier in this call I said, you can look to people who are 5 to 10 years ahead of you and model them. And I think that Tim Ferriss was absolutely someone who I felt was 5 years ahead of me, 10 years ahead of me several years ago. And so I really took the lessons that he taught me and applied them literally. So there's an exercise in that book called dreamlining, where so basically the first time I read the 4-Hour Workweek, I kind of read over this concept of dreamlining, and okay, that was interesting, but I didn't actually act on it. So I came back to that specific exercise, and I got 3 of my friends together in a coffee shop, and I said, let's all do this exercise together, because if we don't keep each other accountable, then we're never going to do this. We're just going to keep spinning the wheels. And so we all just kind of wrote down what our craziest lifelong goals were that we wanted to achieve within the next 3 to 6 months. And so if there's someone who's been there, that's already experienced this, and they give you advice and you respect them, take that advice and just do it. You don't have to question it, just do it. But then once you do it, you're going to learn things, you're going to have your own experiences, and you're going to find things that are more authentic to you. And I think that's what I've kind of gone through myself.
I think that is the gold of the episode. I think if anybody wants to do something, then look at somebody who is ahead of the curve and look at what they're doing. And that's what I did with this show. I'm not getting away from the fact that I was inspired by certain people that were doing a 7-day-a-week show, and I thought to myself, I'm going to do a 7-day-a-week show. Would I have thought that if I hadn't? No, I probably would have seen what they were doing and gone, that's what you have to do. That's, that's the norm. I'm going to go with 2 days a week. I'm going to go 3 days a week. But if you look at that success, not only does it inspire you to do that, there's a belief mechanism, isn't there? There's a belief because they've already done it. You set off on that path kind of almost knowing that you've got a fair chance of achieving what they've done because they've done it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And there was, I don't know the exact story too well, but there was a guy who broke the 5-minute mile record. And it took a really long time before anyone did that. But once he did that, then several other people followed him immediately after who also broke the 5-minute mile record as well. So once one person does something, then the rest of other people follow, and that inspires other people to do more, to achieve more. And there's also a concept that I talk about in the book, which is called, I think is very, very important. It's habit, gravity, and escape velocity. So a rocket ship spends, I think, 80 to 90% of its energy simply in the initial takeoff. Simply defying gravity is the hardest part of the flight, just from the very beginning. And so I think that analogy also applies to us when we're trying to do something difficult or challenging. The hardest part is just getting that initial liftoff. Once we all get get in motion, and once we kind of get that defy gravity and kind of build that momentum, it becomes easier and easier and easier, and we can soar even higher and higher and higher. And so if you feel like this overwhelming resistance to change or to pursuing your goal, you have to say, okay, that's just escape velocity. And you really got to pour everything you have into overcoming that. And if it's really difficult to overcome that, I just dropped a clue 2 minutes ago when I said I got together 3 of my friends who we all supported each other and kept each other accountable. I think that's really important. If you can get people who share your vision and who kind of shares your similar belief system, that can really help you overcome that resistance.
It's so true what you're saying, because when I started this show, it literally killed me. I'll be honest. It was like hour upon hour upon hour, because every single element of creating a show I had to learn from scratch, and I had the passion to do it, so I forced myself through. And I literally was doing 7 hours. If you listen to the early shows, quite often I'd be going, oh, I look terrible. I was doing 7 hours, 7 days a week, literally 20 hours a day, just trying to get it off the ground, to use that metaphor. But now I was saying to the wife yesterday, I was saying, it's amazing, isn't it? I can do the whole show in 2 days. I've got 5 days off to do what I want. And it's only because of that effort to get it off the ground that now it's being pulled by its own gravity somehow.
Yeah, exactly, because you have that experience and you've built up that momentum. I mean, you rolled up your sleeves and you learned everything you had to do to make your podcast successful. And the more you did it, the easier it became. And now you get to the point where you can enjoy it. You can take several days off. And that's exactly the way it was with my own business. The first year, I didn't make any money. And the second year, I was still struggling. But in years 4 and 5, I was working 10 hours a week. I had reduced my client base to just my best clients. And I was able to do whatever the heck I wanted. I had enough money. I could travel around the world. And I think a big part of it is, have you read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell?
No, I haven't, actually. I've read most of these. Outliers and stuff. He was one of these, wasn't it?
Yeah, so basically there's several schools of thought around this. There's also the power of habit. There's a concept called thin slicing, where you're able to make good decisions very quickly, but only if you have a lot of experience in that area. So if you're an expert in something, you don't really have to do a lot of research. You can make great decisions. He calls that thin slicing. So it's kind of a bit about mastery. So if you really want to, if you want to have a good life, you really have to kind of put in the work and get the experience first, roll up your sleeves and really do what it takes. And have confidence that it's going to become easier the more more experience and the more knowledge you acquire.
Well, let's play some words now, and they're the theme of the whole show, and it's the reason why we called it Join Up Dots, and this is the late Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
Do you buy into those words, Danny, now you look back over your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he continues that speech by saying, remembering that you're going to die is the best way to forget that you have something to lose. And he says that you're already naked, there's no reason to follow your heart. I'm sure you know that quote as well.
Oh, absolutely. Be young and foolish.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have a big dot in your life? When you look back on the Join Up Dots timeline, is there one that you kind of go, yeah, really? I think that was when it started to change for me. That's when I was born somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I have several of those dots. As far as my business is concerned, I had all of these affirmations and goals on my wall. As far as my business was concerned, I was chasing after these income goals that I could never seem to reach, and I realized that they were very arbitrary and not really well thought out. And once I realized, I stepped back and kind of said, I want to do some things differently. I want to say, 80-20. I was chasing after too many leads, too many new clients, and I felt like I was wasting my time. I was working, 14 hours a day and just really unhappy, and I didn't know why I was doing it. And so, I was working one day at Starbucks on Christmas Day, and the barista came to me and just said, "Why are you working on Christmas?" And I said, "Why are you working on Christmas?" and it was a good comeback for sure. It felt like, I had no reason to be there except that I was locked, I was trapped on my business. And the real breakthrough kind of came out when I stepped back and said, look, I don't need to do all of this. I'm trying too much. And so I took a month and I went to Mexico. I actually lived down there for 2 months, just as an experiment. And I could see that, everything was still running. My life was still running and everything was going fine. But I felt like if I broke free from my routine, things might fall apart. So I thought, well, at least it's just a 2-hour drive. I can drive back if need be and fix things. But I think I really had to break free from that routine of trying to do what everybody else was doing and try to create like $1 million a year business. I felt like I had way too much pressure and I wasn't being true to myself.
Well, let's send you back in time now. This is the end of the show, and This is the part that we call a sermon on the mic, when we send you back in time to have a one-on-one with your younger self. And if you could go back in time and speak to the young Danny, what age would you choose and what advice would you give? Well, we're going to find out, because I'm going to play the theme tune, and when it fades, you're up. This is the sermon on the mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the sermon on the mic, the sermon on the mic.
Yeah, so if I was to go back and speak to my younger self, hopefully he would listen to me, because he kind of rejected authority. But that's kind of what I would tell him is don't listen too much to others and just kind of be true to yourself. Stop comparing yourself to others, because it's going to make you unhappy. And don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't feel like you are somehow flawed or broken because other people are better than you at something. Don't compare yourself to them. Learn from them and compare yourself to yourself. Be the best version of yourself. And don't be envious of other people. Support them and try your best to learn from them and model them as best as you can. And become comfortable with losing. Don't be afraid of losing. Get out there and take the blows. Get beat up, and you'll discover this strength inside of you that you never knew existed.
Danny, how can our audience connect with you, sir?
Yes, so I have a blog and a podcast at openworldmag.com with a lot of great articles and resources. You can also check out the book, search on Amazon.com, Buy Your Own Island. We often do promotions for the book. And you can also get the audiobook at buyyourowisland.com.
We will have all the links on the show notes. Danny, thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up the dots and connecting our pasts is the best way to build our futures. Danny Flood, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you to the listener. I hope you enjoyed the interview.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.